I was talking to a friend about a date he went on. He said it was great, fantastic conversation. They lasted the same, stupid jokes, really got along. He even went on a second date and a third. So I asked, what happened? And he just shrugged. Nah, but we almost held hands once. He just left it at that, filed it away in his memory as a nice time. And I was struck by how that's exactly how most people treat books. They'll read it cover to cover. They'll say, yeah, I went on that date once, good times. And then they just put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
The thing is, for me, that's not enough. You haven't actually finished. The consummation, the part where your lips finally lock.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet. If that never happens, what was the point? Okay, so let's unpack this a little, because the point, it seems to me, is that just consuming a book, reading it cover to cover, well, that's really only the beginning.
Right, the first step.
Yeah, like that first sort of tentative date. The consummation you talked about, that happens after. It's the internal fight, the struggle to really grasp it, pulling out what feels relevant. It's when you stop seeing the text as just like external data and start weaving it into how you see things.
That's a perfect way to frame this deep dive, actually. We're looking beyond just passive enjoyment.
Right.
Yeah, our focus today is really on that active, sometimes difficult, maybe even combative engagement with what you read. We'll dig into the evidence suggesting this kind of intense interaction. It sharpens critical thinking.
Okay.
It offers real, measurable psychological benefits, even physiological ones. And ultimately, it can act as a sort of anchor for understanding yourself better.
You're essentially turning information, the input, into something more solid, something internal and resilient.
Exactly. Applicable knowledge.
Okay, that definitely sets up our mission then. Moving from just reading to, well, truly integrating. So let's start with that initial clash, the battle you mentioned. What really separates a book that's just, entertaining from one that genuinely changes how you think or operate?
Yeah. Well, when we look at the material, it's pretty clear that a good book, it gives you companionship, maybe some fun, a nice way to pass the time.
Sure, that's valuable in itself.
Oh, absolutely. But where it gets really interesting, the best books, the ones that truly stick with you, they're defined by how they actively challenge you.
They push back somehow.
Yes. The goal isn't just absorption. It's about having battled and grasped the book, as the source puts it, and actually drawing something out of it. The reading becomes less passive consumption, more like productive work.
And why does that battle feel so lasting? I mean, it's amazing how wrestling with a classic from, say, 400 years ago can feel just as urgent as something published last year.
That's the resonance, isn't it? That lasting literary power is kind of the ultimate test. Take Shakespeare, for instance. His thoughts on honor in Henry V. It's fascinating. The king is reflecting on what drives him, saying, "By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. Such outward things dwell not in my desires. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. But if it be a sin to covet honor, it yearns me not if men my garments wear. I'm the most offending soul alive."
Wow. That's quite a piece of self-analysis. It's not stuff he wants. It's that inner drive for meaning, for validation, that coveting of honor. How does someone today, maybe someone deep in a demanding career or, navigating tricky politics, how do they connect with that? A 15th century king's internal struggle.
Because fundamentally, the conflict is the same, isn't it?
I suppose so.
The king's laying bare that tension between material stuff, gold, clothes, and the intangible things, self-worth, legacy, honor.
Right.
So in a modern context, okay, you're probably not a king.
Probably not.
But you're constantly weighing, say, career success against personal integrity, or maybe financial gain versus doing the ethical thing. When you really engage with a passage like that, you're basically using Shakespeare to scrutinize your own ambitions. The text kind of forces you to map out your own internal moral compass.
And that clarity, it applies elsewhere, too.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kerouac and Kafka earlier. Their enduring relevance must stem from a similar challenging quality, right?
Absolutely. Kerouac's work, for generations, it's been this spark, hasn't it? Igniting that urge for travel, for self-discovery, maybe rejecting the expected path. It's an active call to sort of change your life.
Yeah, you feel that energy.
And Kafka feels maybe even more relevant now. Those nightmarish Kafkaesque scenarios of illogical, endless bureaucracies.
Oh, no, definitely.
Who hasn't felt that utter powerlessness dealing with some opaque system, whether it's government or corporate red tape or even academia sometimes?
Right.
The best writers articulated those deep anxieties way before our modern systems really perfected them.
This active, combative engagement, it sounds like it takes real mental effort. Is it purely an intellectual exercise, or does this literary wrestling match translate into broader cognitive development?
Oh, it absolutely translates. Research in educational psychology, it shows a clear link. Active engagement with challenging literary texts, it directly boosts advanced critical thinking skills, particularly in adult learners.
How so? What's the mechanism?
Well, when you read a challenging text, you're forced to deal with ambiguity, maybe an unreliable narrator, complex motivations, subtle critiques of society.
Okay.
You're essentially learning how to handle cognitive dissonance, how to spot patterns of power and meaning. And those skills, they're portable. You can apply them to any complex problem, not just literature.
So if literary works are inherently critiques of culture, then by engaging with them combatively, we're actually honing the very tools we need to critique our own cultural moment.
That's precisely the engine here. We see that literary works, okay, they're products of cultural critique from their time, but when we engage actively, we kind of force them to reflect on and even enact a critique of our immediate present.
We ask, how does this play out now?
Exactly, in my world. And this leads to a pretty profound point made in the sources. The basic task of making sense of one's world, especially in modern societies, it necessarily involves, at least partly, literary criticism.
That's a big claim. Why specifically literary criticism? Why is that the key to interpreting, say, current cultural chaos, especially in market-driven societies?
Well, think about societies organized under, let's call it the capitalist mode of production. Systems where value, status, resources are mostly shaped by market forces.
Okay.
These systems often obscure the real dynamics of power or alienation. They do it through cultural stories, through consumerism, through complex political talk.
Right, things get muddy.
Exactly. Literary criticism gives you the tools, interpretation, allegory to decode those obscured realities. It teaches you to look beneath the surface transaction, to see the narrative structure, the hidden biases, the power dynamics, the deep cultural contradictions.
You learn to read the world like you read a difficult novel.
Precisely, seeking the underlying theme, not just the surface plot.
That really connects the personal intellectual struggle to the bigger global picture. You might feel some modern anxiety, but by reading and battling a classic text, you realize, okay, this feeling isn't just me, it's not random. It actually points to a larger historical pattern where this same anxiety has shown up before.
Yeah, the sources give a really striking example of this. Think about reading Henry Roth's On the End of the World. Roth wrote it after escaping the Third Reich, right?
Right.
He was grappling with a world that felt completely chaotic, trying to figure out how seemingly decent people can behave absurdly, realizing the world was caught in a fever. Now imagine a reader today picking that up, maybe during a time of intense global division or a really politically charged moment, let's say, navigating what some call Trump's America. That feeling Roth describes, that sense of historical madness, it rings incredibly true, doesn't it?
It provides a kind of historical framework for your current stress. It doesn't just describe a past fever, it gives you a tool to diagnose the one you might be feeling now.
Exactly. It lets you shift from feeling individually overwhelmed to seeing yourself within a larger historically resonant pattern, confronting and analyzing that feeling through literature. That turns raw anxiety into informed critique.
That is really profound. Okay, so if the initial battle helps structure our thinking, what about the emotional side? The psychological fallout from facing these challenging, often dark ideas. We've wrestled with the text. How do we process the fight itself? Which I guess brings us to the quieter part, processing it through writing.
Yeah, for many people who really engage deeply with reading, that processing naturally leads into writing. It could be detailed notes in the margins or formal analysis, maybe published criticism. But the act itself often happens almost out of necessity.
Like a compulsion.
Almost. They often describe this kind of sustained writing practice as functioning like cheap therapy.
I love that phrase, cheap therapy. And the description of writing as a quiet conversation with yourself, that really resonates. It highlights the internal sort of non-performative aspect. It's self-improvement on your own terms.
It's completely self-directed. And the sources note something interesting. Writers often get significantly better with age, not just technically, but in wisdom, in insight. Why? Because they gain more self-knowledge over time. And that self-knowledge lets them have a better conversation with their counterpart, their writing self. It's a process that inherently deepens self-understanding through that quiet internal dialogue.
And this isn't just, anecdotal feeling. There's solid empirical research behind this, right? Often linked to the psychologist James Pennebaker. What does that research actually show about the measurable health benefits of this kind of expressive writing?
Oh, the research on the Pennebaker paradigm is absolutely foundational here. It really confirms that expressive writing, things like journaling, even focused literary analysis, they offer tangible benefits, physiological, psychological, even social.
Wow.
The basic idea is that processing deep, emotionally charged stuff through structured language, it has a quantifiable positive effect on your long-term well-being and on managing stress.
Okay, let's get practical. For someone listening who thinks maybe I could try this, what's the basic method used in these studies? How do they structure this kind of therapeutic writing?
It's surprisingly straightforward, but quite powerful. Typically, participants are asked to write about a traumatic experience or something highly emotional for maybe 3 to 5 sessions, often on consecutive days, and usually for about 15 to 20 minutes each time. It can be done in a lab setting or just privately at home, but the instructions are key.
What are those instructions? They must be quite specific given the potential emotional weight.
They are. They're designed to encourage real vulnerability and deep exploration. Participants are explicitly told something like, write your very deepest thoughts and feelings about the most traumatic experience of your entire life or an extremely important emotional issue that has affected you and your life.
That's intense.
It is. And they're often prompted to connect the issue to relationships, parents, partners, friends, and to their sense of self, who they were, who they are now, who they hope to become. And critically, absolute confidentiality is guaranteed to remove any fear of judgment.
Okay, that confidentiality piece feels crucial.
Yeah.
What about the control groups? How do you isolate the effect of writing about emotion?
Right. Control is vital. The control groups get instructions to write objectively, factually about neutral topics, like describe the room you're in detail, or list your plans for the day. But, and this is important, avoid any emotional language, opinions, or internal thoughts.
Just the facts.
Just the facts. This lets researchers pinpoint the therapeutic effects specifically to the processing of emotion through language. And neither group gets any feedback on what they write.
Right. Now, this brings us to what seems like the central puzzle of this research, that physiological paradox. If people are digging into their deepest traumas, surely they feel worse during the writing session. How does that immediate distress lead to long-term health improvements?
This is honestly the most fascinating part. Writing about past trauma consistently showed 2 distinct effects that seem, on the surface, contradictory. First, yes, there was a short-term increase in physiological arousal.
Like stress signals.
Exactly. Higher heart rates, skin conductance, and people reported feeling upset, anxious, maybe distressed during those 15-20 minutes. But the second, and arguably more important finding, was a statistically significant decrease in overall health problems in the long run. Fewer visits to the doctor, better immune function markers, fewer chronic symptoms in the months after the writing.
So the short-term emotional hit is somehow necessary for the long-term physical and psychological gain.
Essentially, yes, that seems to be the case. Despite the immediate discomfort, the emotional spike, participants almost universally reported finding the experience valuable and meaningful when asked about it later.
Why? What's the mechanism?
The act of confrontation and, crucially, articulation. Turning that chaotic, stressful, maybe traumatic internal stuff into organized language, that seems to be the key.
Can you elaborate on that? How does turning stress into words actually help regulate the body's long-term health?
Well, think about it. When a stressful or traumatic memory is suppressed or actively avoided, it kind of sits there in your mind as unresolved cognitive baggage.
Right, lurking.
Yeah, it's a constant low-level drain on your mental energy. And that chronic stress eventually wears down your immune system, impacts physical health. By forcing yourself to articulate it, to structure it with verbs, nouns, causes, effects, maybe a narrative, you're moving it from a raw, unprocessed emotional state into an integrated linguistic and cognitive structure. You're literally making sense of it.
You're organizing the chaos.
You are. That quiet, subtle conversation we talked about, that's the process of integration. You structure the emotion, you categorize it, and somehow that reduces its overall cognitive and physiological burden. So the therapy isn't magic. It's rooted in the self-awareness you gain through the linguistic processing. You learn about your triggers, your stress responses.
That what gives you the tools to manage them better long term.
Precisely. That self-awareness is critical.
Okay, it seems like whether we're wrestling with Shakespeare's ambition or writing about personal trauma, the act of making sense of internal chaos through language is incredibly powerful. But If it's so beneficial internally, so therapeutic, why do people, readers, critics, keep doing it? Especially in a public way. Is it purely self-help, or are there other, maybe more complex motivations kicking around?
That gets to the heart of the motivation question, doesn't it? Because the sustained practice of critical reflection, of analysis, it's rarely driven by just one pure thing. The sources definitely point to this complex dance between intrinsic and extrinsic drivers.
Right, you see that tension, like the idea of the reader who just loves to read for the sake of it and thus writes for the sake of it, that pure internal drive.
That intrinsic motivation is definitely the foundation for many. It's that deep, genuine passion for the books themselves and maybe a personal need for self-expression. For someone like that, the source suggests they'd be unbloody likely to stop writing, even if no one ever read it.
The reward is entirely internal.
Entirely. The satisfaction of figuring something out, the joy of crafting the words, the self-knowledge you gain.
But then there's the other side, the extrinsic pull, which often seems tied up with the ego, right? When that internal therapeutic work suddenly becomes public criticism or published analysis, surely the desire for external validation kicks in.
Oh, absolutely it does. And we shouldn't just dismiss the ego as a bad thing. As the sources point out, the ego is there for good reasons, fundamentally linked to self-preservation and self-improvement. Wanting to write and publish to maybe boost his ego, as it's put, that's acknowledged as a real, powerful, extrinsic driver that fuels the sustained practice.
The desire to be heard.
Validated.
Exactly. To have your insights acknowledged, to contribute visibly to the ongoing conversation.
But isn't there a risk there? If the starting point is internal processing, self-improvement, isn't relying on external validation on the ego boost a bit shaky? What if the audience isn't there or the critics slam it? Well, that's why the duality is so important. A practice driven only by ego, yeah, that's probably quite brittle.
Right.
But maybe a practice driven only by passion sometimes lacks the structure, the discipline needed for consistent public output. Usually the interplay is more symbiotic.
So
the passion fuels the content, gives the internal reward. The ego, the desire for validation, provides the push to refine it, to engage an audience, to actually finish the thing and put it out there. It helps turn the quiet internal chat into something shared, which in turn can amplify the self-improvement goal by testing it against external perspectives.
Okay, so they can work together.
They often do. But even beyond passion and ego, there's a third really practical reason for writing that ties right back to our opening idea of truly claiming the book.
This must be where the goldfish memory comes in.
Precisely. It's the pragmatic defense against our own faulty memory. We read something, we wrestle with it, we feel intensely. Maybe we love it, maybe we viscerally hate it, think that book eats ass.
We've all been there.
Right. But 6 months down the line, the specifics get fuzzy. Your memory will almost certainly let you down on why you had that strong reaction.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. You remember the verdict, thumbs up or thumbs down? But the reasoning, the nuances, the specific bits that made you feel that way, gone.
And that's where writing acts as a genuine anchor to the book. It captures those immediate, fresh feelings and thoughts. When your memory fails later, those written words become the closest representation of my sentiments to that original reading experience. It's like an intellectual backup drive.
An invaluable record.
Totally. Reviewing those notes or that review maybe years later, it reminds you exactly why you found that character infuriating, or why that plot twist felt so cheap, or why that particular sentence structure seemed brilliant. This external record keeping, it's kind of the final step in truly claiming the book.
It solidifies it.
Yes. It turns that fleeting consumption, that temporary information, into preserved knowledge, solid insight. It makes sure the original intellectual battle isn't lost to time. It shifts the reading from just enjoyment to accessible, lasting wisdom.
That really does bring us full circle beautifully. We started with that idea of reading being like almost holding hands on a date, nice but incomplete. And this deep dive, it's shown that the real consummation, the true relationship with the text, it involves that active battle for meaning, the quiet therapeutic conversation through writing, and then anchoring that memory against forgetting. That's what delivers the real point.
And if we zoom out, connect this to the bigger picture, it's clear this kind of deep, sustained engagement isn't just some niche hobby for academics. It's actually a critical strategy for navigating modern life effectively.
How so?
Well, whether you're gaining self-awareness through that empirically supported expressive writing, or you're using sharp literary criticism to make sense of the confusing political or cultural noise around you, this whole practice goes way beyond just passively consuming information.
It sounds like actively wrestling with a difficult book and then taking the time to write about it might be one of the most fundamental things you can do for both your mind and your body.
It really is a profound act of, self-preservation almost. It transforms passive knowledge into genuinely applied understanding. And it does two things at once. It sharpens your critical tools for analyzing the outside world, and it supports your long-term health by giving you a robust way to manage internal stress and trauma.
So maybe the greatest outcome of diving deep into the words of others isn't just understanding them better, but unlocking this ongoing, subtle, therapeutic conversation with yourself. One that doesn't just build a memory bank of old insights, but acts as a powerful engine for continuous self-improvement and self-preservation.